Welcome to NFL News Update, where touchdowns meet headlines. Stay in the game with the freshest NFL updates. This is your quick dive into football fervor.
DJ Reader lands in Detroit with confidence despite the bittersweet feelings he leaves behind. After overseeing a turnaround with Cincinnati that spanned 4 years, 2 torn quads, and a Super Bowl berth, the defensive tackle might not have always intended to leave, but he's still capable of looking back with pride. It's super tough, but things happen in free agency, and whether it's upstairs going in a different direction, or, I did get injured a couple times there. Reader said of his Bengals' departure Monday on the Jim Rome Show. They may see it a certain way, and I see it different. Who's to say who's right? I'm always gonna feel like I'm right, and they're gonna feel like they're right. It was super tough to leave something that you built, but there's comfort in knowing that I left it in a better place than where I found it. So I had to find comfort in that part. When Reader arrived in Cincy in 2020 after spending his first 4 years in the NFL as a Texan, the Bengals were coming off a 2-14 campaign, their 4th consecutive losing season after 5 straight years of AFC wildcard exits. He was one of the team's big free agent gets, with the catalyst for change offensively coming in the form of the 2020 NFL Draft's No. 1 overall pick, quarterback Joe Burrow. Reader would tear his left quad 5 games into that first year, while Burrow would last 10 contests before suffering a torn ACL. The injuries contributed to another losing season, this time 4-11-1, but it remains the last time the Bengals finished under 500. Both Reader and Burrow returned in 2021 to lead Cincinnati to a surprise berth in Super Bowl LVI and a trip to the AFC Championship game the following season. The two were again injured during a disappointing 9-8 season in 2023, this time with Burrow tearing a ligament in his wrist in Week 11 and Reader tearing his right quad 4 weeks later. But while Burrow will continue what the two helped build on both sides of the ball starting 4 years ago, Reader's injury history has, in part, necessitated a new challenge elsewhere. Reader has been a force on the interior when on the field, but he played only 44 of a possible 67 games for the Bengals due to a series of smaller injuries on top of the 2 quad tears. The biggest challenge for the 335-pounder in his age 30 season will be availability, especially coming off another massive injury. Reader has nary a concern about that. I don't see any setbacks keeping me from being able to be right back where I was and the player who I was, he said. When I'm out there playing, I'm one of the top 3 players at my position, so I don't think that's gonna change. Once I get back and this knee's back, I think he'll be like you, Jim Rome said, another setup for greatness to go out there and do this thing. Nor do the Lions, who signed him to a 2-year deal at the outset of free agency to add to an already stellar defensive line. Reader didn't finish 2023 graded as a top 3 interior defensive lineman according to PFF, but his 82.2 overall grade is nothing to sneeze at, placing him in the top half of his position during the regular season. He still had it last year, and as long as that remains the case following his rehab, he pairs perfectly with fellow lineman Alan McNeil. 88.6 overall PFF grade in 2023, likely eating up blocks to free up McNeil through the middle while Pro Bowler Aiden Hutchinson comes carrying for quarterbacks around the edge. I'm super excited, man. It's a lot of talent on that team, Reader said. The defensive side of the ball is just like loaded with talent and guys who are hungry. If you watch them play, those guys fly around. They don't do everything right or perfect. Nobody does, but they fly around and they get after it. I think that's what's inspiring. So I'm excited just to get around those guys. Along with all the talent on the roster, the Lions also offer Reader a different launching pad compared to the Bengals 4 years prior. Having already gone through the turnaround with an NFC Championship game appearance last season, Detroit now needs additions like him to come in and help them over the top. Derrick Henry is bound for Baltimore, just as the 2-time rushing champion expected this offseason. However, Henry admits that it could have been an ideal situation for him to stay home, not in Tennessee, but rather in Dallas. Henry resides in Dallas, but the Cowboys never came calling, which set him up to join the Ravens on a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million. I knew once free agency started that I wanted to work something out with the Ravens if we could, Henry said recently on the Pivot podcast. Even though I'm living in Dallas and Dallas being a perfect situation as well, because we live there, we ain't got to move. But at the same time, Ravens, the history of it, and then talking to Ray Lewis at the Pro Bowl, his passion about the organization, his impact there, and how he talked about it. I was like, man, if I'm not in Tennessee or I don't get to go to Dallas, I'd love to be a Raven. Henry's now officially a Raven and happy with how things transpired. Nonetheless, it's certainly interesting that the Cowboys never came calling, especially as they currently stand with the recently re-signed Rico Dowdle as their top back. They ain't holly at me at all, Henry answered when asked if the Cowboys were in the mix. For Henry, it would have been a surreal situation to play with a star on his helmet. Ideal a location as it might well have been, Henry indicated nothing was ever in the works. It would have been crazy, he said. I thought it'd been some type of reach out, some type of talks, or whatever. They never reached out, you know what I'm saying? I don't really know too much about their organization. All I know is what I hear. I was talking to my agent. They weren't really interested. It is what it is. Like I said earlier, I'm gonna be where I'm gonna be, and I feel like Baltimore was the perfect spot. Henry, who's eclipsed 1,000 yards rushing in 5 of the last 6 seasons, is now aiming to become the first Ravens running back to hit the milestone since Mark Ingram in 2019. He could also become the first running back to lead the team in rushing since Gus Edwards in 2018. Quarterback Lamar Jackson, who's twice eclipsed 1,000 yards rushing, has led Baltimore on the ground each season since 2019. Henry figures to add plenty of thunder to complement the lightning of Jackson out of the backfield. I'm glad it worked out, he said. Lamar, that's no question. Zay Flowers, he had a great year. You know what Mark Andrews brings. Offensive line is solid. They lost a couple guys, but I'm sure they'll find some guys in free agency or draft people or the players they already have there to fill in. And then no 42. Big Pat, Ricard, we had them on film, we highlight him. So I'm excited to be playing with him as well. He's a beast. Along with all the individual weapons on offense Henry mentioned, he's joining a team fresh off winning the AFC North and advancing to the AFC Championship game where it lost to the Chiefs. Henry could be the piece that finishes the Ravens' Super Bowl puzzle. Baltimore hasn't made it to the big game since the Ravens won the Lombardi Trophy in the 2012 season, and Henry, despite a career decorated with 4 Pro Bowls, has yet to reach a Super Bowl. It's a goal he and his new team are now eager to accomplish. I'm happy I'm going somewhere that they're hungry, he said. They're hungry for it and they're right on the cusp. They're always in the conversation. I know Lamar wants one really bad, so I ain't going to somewhere where the expectation is like, we're going to see what's going to happen. Let's make the playoffs and make some noise. No, they're trying to win it. Being so close and losing that game to Kansas City, I know they're hungry. I know they're gonna come in with the right mindset, and let's get to it. I'm ready to come in and be that added piece to it to help spring them forward any way possible, any way I can.